Welcome to ScaryHower, where the darkness is always listening. Tonight, we're stepping into the house on Ridgeton Lane, a place that doesn't just stand, it breathes. It waits. The story begins with Mark, a man drawn to the abandoned property by a dare, or perhaps a darker curiosity. The moment he crossed the threshold, the house exhaled. Above him, tiny tracing footsteps began to crawl across the ceiling. They were slow, almost careful, as if something was savoring the moment, excited by his arrival. Mark tried to dismiss it as the settling of an old house, the wind, anything but what his gut told him was true. He was not alone. He chose a bedroom upstairs, one with a heavy oak door and a large window overlooking the dead garden. Exhausted from the day, he convinced himself it was all in his head and lay down, trying to find sleep in the suffocating silence. But the house had other plans. At precisely 1:12 a.m., his eyes snapped open. He hadn't heard a sound, but he felt a change in the air. Then, with a slow, agonizing creak, his bedroom door began to swing open on its own. A trembling shadow, impossibly long and thin, stretched across the floor from the hallway, inching its way toward him like a searching finger. The footsteps started again, no longer on the ceiling, but on the floor right outside his room. They circled his bed, slow and deliberate, the floorboards groaning under an unseen weight. Closer and closer they came, until they stopped right beside his head. The air grew cold, and a putrid smell, like damp earth and decay, filled his nostrils. Then a dry, rasping whisper slithered into his ear, a voice that sounded like crumbling leaves. "Don't blink. It hears that." Pure terror seized him. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't scream. He couldn't. He just scrambled out of bed, a frantic, clumsy motion, and bolted into the hallway. But he wasn't escaping. Every step he took was matched by a step right behind him. Tap, tap, tap. And the footsteps behind him grew faster, heavier, closing the distance with terrifying speed. He fumbled for the front door, his only thought to get out, to feel the night air on his skin. But as his fingers brushed the brass knob, he heard a loud, metallic click. The deadbolt had shot home on its own. The door was locked. The lights in the hallway began to flicker violently, shaking in their fixtures as if the entire house was taking a shuddering, ragged breath. The walls seemed to warp and groan around him, the very structure of the house alive and hostile. With the front door sealed, his only other option was the basement. He threw open the door and plunged down the wooden stairs, not daring to look back. The basement was a vast dark space, filled with the smell of wet concrete and something else. Something ancient and predatory, and in the farthest corner, shrouded in a darkness that seemed deeper than the rest, a pale figure waited. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long. As his eyes adjusted, he saw it had no face, just a smooth expanse of skin. It didn't move, but its whisper echoed in his mind, clearer than the one in the bedroom. It chooses the one who's awake the longest. Before Mark could even process the words, the sound exploded. The footsteps were no longer just behind him. They were everywhere at once. Pounding through the walls, crashing from the ceiling, erupting from the very floor beneath him. The entire house was a deafening drumbeat of pursuit. The concrete at his feet began to crack, fissures spreading out like a spiderweb. And then, with a final sickening lurch, the ground gave way. Cold, skeletal hands shot out from the abyss, wrapping around his ankles. They were impossibly strong, covered in soil and rot. He cried out, a raw, desperate sound that was swallowed by the roaring darkness. He clawed at the broken concrete, his fingers bleeding, but it was no use. The hands pulled him down into the living, breathing dark that was the heart of the house. He was consumed, silenced, another soul fed to the endless hunger of the thing on Ridgeton Lane. And then silence. A heavy, final quiet settled over the basement. The ground sealed itself, leaving no trace of the struggle. Upstairs, in the dusty silence of the house, a fresh pair of tiny footsteps began their slow, patient patrol, crawling across the ceiling, waiting, always waiting for the next person to step inside. If you enjoyed this trip into the shadows, please show your support. Hit that like button, follow the channel, and subscribe to ScaryHower for more tales that lurk in the dark. Thank you for listening.